Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today is part 2 of looking at a oil painting by American Impressionist T.C. Steele. The name of the painting is Pleasant Run. I really debated doing a second part on this. I like to get paintings done in one day whenever it comes with watercolors. That's just kind of my approach and my mentality to watercolors, where it's kind of a one and done type deal. Oil paintings, I'll stretch out over days or months just because of the space that they take up, the glazing, just having fun, just experimenting with oils. But watercolor and other mediums, I just have a hard time coming back to a few days later. But I decided that there's a few experiments I can do on this one to try to push it further. I want to review a few things. It has been a few days for me with this. So I do feel like I'm starting to get the Impressionist application feel, and the application of white gouache, and you can see in different locations where I did that in the previous video. Drying it and then kind of glazing with watercolor over that gouache led to a really interesting effect. In fact, Joe Menza has been playing with white gouache lately and getting these textured effects and these kind of changes in chroma. So I think a few people are experimenting with that currently. I'm not saying it wasn't done in the past, just saying some people that are currently exploring that. Other things that I really liked in the study originally was the tracing of the lines that all really led to this point. And it really has me rethinking perspective in composition, like the linear perspective and the lines leading to it. So those are a few things. Now, the one thing that kind of had me a little bit, I guess, I don't know if you'd say worried or unsatisfied, was my lack of darks. Now, with his painting process, I'm assuming that he laid the oil in next to each other, mixed it, and put it in. And here, I'm doing a little bit of that application, but I'm also layering my watercolors, trying to build that up. So that's one of the things that kind of inhibits the medium, at least for me with my approach. That being said, I did think, well, I could really just go for it and pour out some India ink and play with India ink over it. I did have maybe just think about applying pure black. But that being said, I have a book on maritime painting that was sitting on the living room floor. Okay, because I'm just grabbing books, I'm moving around with it. You know how it is whenever you do art. You make quite the mess. And the cover was reminiscent of this painting, the kind of feel with some of the dark areas with the very light water, the water capturing the light. And I was like, all right, let me peruse this book. And one formula, a recipe that they had for darks was alizarin crimson and phthalo blue. And this was an oil formula. And that reminded me of something that I used whenever I first started oil painting back in, like, let's say 2006, 2007. I had bought 4 pigments, white, cadmium yellow U, ultramarine blue, and alizarin crimson. And I would mix my ultramarine and my alizarin crimson for kind of a dark purple, and that's what I used as my darks with that limited palette when I first started years ago. That being said, while I'm talking, I am mixing those two, the phthalo and the alizarin crimson, and it's definitely on the purpler side. And I'm curious how this might be as a potential dark. So I'm going to go in with the hake brush and apply this and start trying to really push my tonality in the darker direction, or just get a larger span of tonality where we have the lightest lights and we have our darkest darks. From what I recall in some art books is that tonality wise, and I'm just talking about lights and darks, the Impressionists were usually on kind of the lighter side of things, the higher key, the brighter and cheerful. All the tonalists were kind of darker and very close together tonal wise. But often some art books will have sections on tonality and composition, and hopefully I'm interpreting what I'm recalling from years ago correctly, is that they would have different compositions based off of the prevalence of light over white versus the prevalence of a dark, midtones, etc., and how they interact. And that was kind of an approach to composition. This, to summarize what I'm trying to say, is that maybe a bright, cheerful scene might just have a little bit of dark in it, while a classically dark tonalist scene might have a bright white small area on the horizon where a heavier percent of the painting is darker tonal wise. So anyway, the purple is apparent in some areas where I am going over the lighter backgrounds. Areas that are already started establishing as darker areas are handling the dark look better. As I perused that one book that I was referring to, the maritime seascape paintings, which I didn't really like the artists, the writers' tone and approach. I just felt like a lot of it was personal preference and bias, and a little bit of difficulty with comprehension, or just kind of short statements. But that being said, where was I going with that? He had mentioned Paynes Gray as kind of a go-to, because he was talking about oils, watercolors, etc. And Paynes Gray is a go-to for watercolorist for a dark, and pointed out that, you know, Paynes Gray is mixed with a black and ultramarine usually. And there's really nothing wrong with that. I mean, I absolutely love Paynes Gray. I think it's a fantastic convenience color. And if you follow a lot of contemporary artists, watercolor, they will have their own grays, essentially. Like Jane Blundell, she mixes a classic recipe of burnt sienna and ultramarine for a dark, and she uses it so much that she pre-mixes it and calls it Jane's Gray. I think Daniel Smith jumped on board with her, and I think that's actually available as a tube. I think, you know, Lois Davidson, she's been making pigments with her daughter, or at least making watercolor pans. I think that they made a mixture, Davidson's Gray. think that they have that available on Etsy. From her Facebook posts, I think that that's been well received. I do like how this mix I can apply over different areas and get different effects essentially. Like if I apply it here, we get the more purple aspect, and then over areas that it was darker, went more dark. So that is pretty cool. So today's a rainy day. Yesterday I had a farmer's market, and this was super cool. I think at the beginning of the year, a lot of people just wanted to get out and, pick up art supplies, art stuff, and have fun. So I did really good at the first two art markets this year. Yesterday it was okay. The first two art markets, I did have a free table of art, with inflation and all this other stuff, and having extra art in the art room and stuff that's not easy for me to just mail out and give away. I had set up a table of free art, and people were really receptive to that. I didn't have anything prepared for the free art table yesterday, but a lady came up and she's like, "Oh, remember me? You gave me some free art last time." I'm like, "Oh, cool, And she reaches into her bag, and I should have brought it in here to show you. And she's like, "I am a potter. I make pottery." And she handed me this like really well done like pottery cup. And she's like, "That's yours, thank you." And that was one of the coolest things, and I'm getting chills talking about it. Just receiving that and having somebody think about me since the last farmer's market, and show their appreciation in that fashion. So I'm super excited, and I think she said her and husband, they're going on vacation for a while. They're retired, and they'll be back in fall. But I think I had mentioned that I'm getting into tea, drinking tea quite a bit. And I was like, "Oh my God, maybe I can commission you to make me a little tiny gaiwan." And I was showing her pictures of stuff because she was just so amazing. It was very, I don't know, just felt really good. It's kind of like if you do good things for people, that whole karma thing, and it kind of comes back around. And I had no intention of doing it to build up karma, but apparently that is what happened. I'm grabbing some lamp black now, just to kind of really push some of these spots in that darker direction. I do feel like the next few master studies, I should lean more towards Hudson River Valley style. I know I'm just making that statement and I'm not following through why. I guess maybe because there's just so much movement here. It's a little difficult. But the Hudson Valley movement, being how they tried to hide the artist's hand within the paintings, where you didn't see the brush strokes really, that might be more beneficial because it'll be like painting from a photograph. While here, I had mentioned earlier, it looks like he laid the pigments side by side for this oil. And that could be an extra, almost too much to take on. Another way to think about it is take on one or two concepts at a time in a painting and experimented with it. As opposed to having something that I have to try to figure out a lot what's going on, a lot of different things. In other news, I've been playing with this stuff called liquid charcoal. A sample of it was sent to me by Mr. Mega, one of the YouTubers and commenters down below, and I liked it, so I pulled the trigger and I ordered a tube of it. The seal wasn't crimped good on the tube, so it was kind of leaking all over, so they're sending a new tube. But that being said, I was able to play with some, and I'm really liking liquid graphite, liquid charcoal. It's very fun and has a lot of potential for me. I was watching one artist on YouTube. There's kind of a time lapse. It was like a 15-minute time lapse. And you could see all the little tree branches that they had put in, and it was charcoal and how they used brushes to smooth things out. It was very inspiring. And I came across another lady. It was pretty much her artwork for sale on a website, but I googled her. She does have a website, and she had very almost like tonalist charcoal landscapes, almost like if you had taken a camera, like a toy camera with the plastic lens, and shot photography with it, and how kind of dark and soft everything is. All right, let me pause this for a dry off and we'll see where we're at. All right, I like the direction that the darker darks are going in, but while I was using the blow dryer, it did have me thinking a little bit how I think at times I'm potentially reinventing the wheel. And I thought about this yesterday with the charcoal paintings, where this is some ultramarine. And some of the art books, like mainly my art books are British watercolor painters, things like that. And I believe in the 1700s with charcoal, watercolor, they would kind of put in their grays and just add some local color over it. So maybe they were ink washing and then going in with some color. And I feel like that's what I'm kind of doing in some of these spots. It does remind me of a comment from an art professor from college where he had said, like in general to like everybody, don't try to like don't focus on trying to make your own style or anything like that, or inventing any new genre of art or anything like that. You know, just focus on learning and painting, and then eventually you'll have your own personal style and your hands will come through. It just started coming down, pouring rain. Did pour out an extra container for water for the gouache, since that has been a little bit of an issue with contamination with the wash water and pigment still in the brush. Here's more white. Here's a little bit of yellow in those. I wonder if it's like a cadmium yellow or what was being used. It was supposed to be bad thunderstorms today, so I should be able to get some different experiments in. We're in the last week before summer break at work. It's interesting how this is more of a kind of toned down application. And then a little bit higher up is the thicker application. Kind of the rapids, or it passing over narrow portions with rocks. Use my finger to smear. I had mentioned the liquid charcoal, and I played with some chalk on top of it. Then I started using my finger to smudge it around, and it kind of hit me with that, like, what am I doing? Where I did that in college, the charcoal drawings. That was like a life drawing class. And you go back and forth, add and subtract, smear and all that. But I'm incredibly reluctant to adding charcoal back into the mediums that I'm playing with in that application, just because it's so messy. Charcoal is so messy. It's absolutely beautiful, and it can do a lot of amazing things, but it's just like kind of pastels and things like that, where I know that everything would have a coating of charcoal dust in the art room if I was to get back deep into charcoal. I'm gonna grab some black. Let's kind of hit some of these spots. Reflections. Let's throw some black up in the innermost portion. This is I think a lamp black. I don't know if I mentioned that. some wispy, far distant tree trunks and branches. They probably would have benefited from a more wet and wet application. Do a little bit, kind of cheat and just get a little bit of texture with this side brush. We do have the cows. Which animals? I enjoy the cows and deer and things like that in paintings, but it's something that I haven't just sat down and really just practiced. It also makes you think, like, how big the original paintings are and how much detail they're actually putting in for that cow, or what brush strokes can be made to emulate a cow, just to make it super fast and loose. Reminiscent of that book that I was telling you about, the Maritime Landscape Paintings. I think it was talking about either Constable and Sergeant or Homer and Sergeant, and how with their boats, even though, okay, how you should work from references with boats, but even the ones that knew boats weren't going overboard and getting all the rigor and everything in there, all the lining. So, and he had said, like, I'm just going to use Sergeant, I'm not sure which one it was, that Sergeant would have known boats. Like, he was a guy who was out and about doing all that stuff. But he just used a few marks to get that. This is like dead center in the painting in here that I'm doing. And on the left, on the original, it's pushed a little bit to the right. But yeah, so that's interesting. And the only person that will really know if a boat is messed up, unless perspective is like super messed up, is, you know, a sailor or somebody that's using boats all the time. There's some Paynes Gray for the underside, or black. And that head comes out. One of my coworkers, the ag teacher, he has about 50 or 60 heads of cattle, and he would probably know if something was wrong with a cow if I painted it. I always joke with him about how there was a Far Side comic. I wound up buying a Far Side comic for him for Christmas, like a calendar, because he's like, I love those things. And there's one I had seen where it was a teacher pointing to the overhead, and it was a cow, and it just said cow, and he just pointed to it, and then just the caption said, any questions, and like a student's raising their hand. So it just made me think, what on earth could potentially be going on in the ag science classrooms? He would actually, they haven't done in the past few years due to COVID and all that, but he would do what's called a boucherie. I believe that's correct pronunciation, where it's you're taking the cow, taking a pig, and teaching the students that might go into that field how to you know, clean the pig and everything. There's some darks in here. Those are kind of just like last minute fiddlings. The rigger stamped on its side really does give a nice playful texture, which is reminiscent of the mark makings made in this painting. That might be a cheap and easy way for you guys to get, or for me to get, that texture in there. If you have too much water, you won't get the separation. I think we're close to calling this study done. I had started the video off with what I felt like I had learned and my reluctance to do a part 2, potentially, through discouragement, potentially through time spent and time elapsed since the last time I had approached this one, a few days. But I'm glad I did it, and I hope you all enjoyed. And of course, please like, subscribe, and follow. If you ever want to support this channel, I have a whole bunch of links down below. I have the Patreon, if you want to support. I try to put exclusive content up there, whether it's just photo references or kind of a more write-up. But if there's things you'd like to see, let me know. And I have the Etsy if there's ever any interest in purchasing and procuring any of my artwork. I wonder if you can hear the rain in the video. Just really focusing on horizontal strokes in that water. To just let that plane happen. Let me pause, we'll do a dry off. Alright, so it feels dry enough. I feel like I did learn quite a bit. Whenever I sign these, I put my name, but I also put, I have to write it, after T.C. Steele. And the name Pleasant Run. So if this is ever matted or displayed or anything like that, it prominently has that there. So people know that this was a study and it's not me biting somebody's style. All right. You all take care and have a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for your support.